Hello, hello, and a warm welcome to everyone joining us from around the world. So good to be with you all. My name is Nelson Diallo. I'll be representing Netlify in today's discussion. Today is all about e-commerce and growing your brand with headless commerce technologies, and of course, the Jamstack. I'm joined by e-commerce experts from Pack Digital. Thanks again to the Pack Digital team for joining today's discussion. We'll have, of course, an intro of the Pack Digital team and their business and some of the projects that they're running on Netlify. From there, we'll go into some of the planned questions, but of course, we'll end with a live audience Q&A as well. So, folks, please feel free to write any questions that you have or any thoughts that come up into the chat, and we'll get those answered at the end. Corey, could you start us off with a quick intro of yourself and some background on the work you've been doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks a lot for having us, Nelson. We're excited to be here. So my name is Corey. I'm one of the co-founders and also the managing director here at Pack. I have a background in technology and development, and I have really been applying that to the Shopify platform for the last 8 years or so. Over that time, I have really been focused on building custom themes and custom workflows. I've been able to learn a lot throughout that time, and also have seen the space evolve quite a bit. So it's been really exciting. Over the last few years, I have been focusing on the headless space. I teamed up with Tyler and Andrew to co-found Pack. So we have a lot of juicy topics to jump into today. But before we do that, I'll pass it over to Andrew.
Cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Pagula. Excited to be here. Thank you, Nelson, for hosting all of this. So I'm one of the co-founders of Pack. I run strategy and operations. So I'll be able to shed some light on how our clients evaluate headless and what some of the driving factors are in making that jump. So maybe to give some additional context first. So Corey mentioned, like, we kind of got to this place through developing a lot of very custom Shopify themes. So we ended up going down this headless path really because larger brands that we were working with started to demand more and more from their Shopify themes to a point where I would say it wasn't really feasible to continue to bend and customize Shopify themes. So it ultimately led us to technologies like Netlify and Next.js, Gatsby, the whole Jamstack world. So, the first project we tackled was about 2 years ago. We implemented Shopify with Gatsby and Contentful. Fast forward a couple years, we've got a number of builds under our belt, and building a lot of tools and technologies to make it really as easy and accessible as possible for a merchant to build a modern storefront. So with that, excited to share more and dive into all those topics, but looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks again, Andrew, for that additional context. And you mentioned a really important point that kind of your clients come with the idea of how should we evaluate headless commerce. So I wanted to ask you, why would someone want to build headless storefronts on Shopify? What's some of the reasoning that goes into that?
Sure. So I'll say first, the space that we play in is brands that are already on Shopify and growing on Shopify. So really the evaluation of headless comes in when they feel some sort of pain as it relates to the front end piece of it. So obviously, if we look at Shopify holistically, they're managing product information, inventory management, order management, and their online store. And the scenarios that we oftentimes come across is, hey, I'm a merchant. I went from 0 to X million online. I started with a Shopify theme, and I've customized that theme. I've added apps. I have evolved a lot, obviously, in a certain amount of scale. We've also come across scenarios where maybe people have built themes from scratch, but just really started to demand more and more out of the front end. So whether it be really custom functionality, whether it be site speed, I think those are kind of like the key points where headless starts to be a part of the conversation. So I think it really depends. It's case by case in terms of what those challenges are. But I think the front end really seems to be a driving factor when brands start to get into the millions in revenue on Shopify.
Awesome. So I think you bring up a few good points about when folks start evaluating headless. Are there any reasons or kind of situations where you would say headless Shopify isn't a fit, and how does that kind of process look for you when you're evaluating?
Yeah, I mean, I think early stages of a business, I think when you're really trying to find product market fit, I think that is really the beauty of Shopify, is that they've essentially lowered every barrier to starting and building an online store, right? So I think there's a lot of advantages to Shopify themes and being able to move quick, and all the whole ecosystem that Shopify has. So I really think headless is kind of been reserved for those brands that are established, are in scale mode, know exactly what they want, and have kind of a longer term plan for that flexibility.
Awesome. Cool. So as brands start to adopt headless and they want to get all the benefits of Jamstack architecture, I know you're an expert in this because you're building these different storefronts. So maybe could you tell the audience more about what are some challenges that you might face when building out a headless Shopify storefront? I think that'll help us contextualize what additional work goes into that migration.
Yeah, Corey, you can feel free to jump in here too, but I think we have a pretty long list here, which I think is really the reason what led us to build a lot of these tools, because the first handful of stores kind of came across some recurring challenges. I think maybe just to start like super broad scope, and then Corey, I'll hand it to you to maybe go through like the specific challenges. But the whole headless world, I think it's kind of the Wild West, right? And I think the whole term of headless, all it really means from a Shopify standpoint is you're just cutting off the head, right? So you have to like be the one, the burden is on you to pick the right technology and the right head, so to speak, to make sure that it's meeting your goals and is like, going to, accomplish everything that you sought out to achieve. I think there's, I think speed is probably the biggest driving factor to all this. And there's, we've seen this a few times in our world too, where you can totally build a store and like achieve all the speed requirements that you were setting out for, but if it's not manageable by your team, or your marketers lose a lot of flexibility, I think that is probably like the biggest criticism of the approach, because I think what everyone's fear is like, building this fast great store, but only having one or two people that really understand how to manage and maintain it. So that's kind of how we look at it, is really like trying to de-risk some of that. But obviously there's lots of challenges like in the implementation to overcome. So I don't know, Corey, if you want to speak to some of the CMS challenges, technical challenges, but there's probably a handful of things we can dive into a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the big thing to really hammer home on is that you can build a really strong and great and fast website and storefront, but if it makes it a little bit more challenging for the marketing team or for the merchant later on, all you really have is a really fast site, but then you have this giant application that you have to learn how to manage. So there's a lot that goes into that. I would say one of the biggest challenges that we see is really content modeling and understanding how to build strong content that a marketing team knows how to manage, and also that a developer knows how to understand and build with too, because you can really have a lot of control over what you're doing on the front end. And it doesn't always mean that you should go outside of these guardrails and build anything and everything. It really means that you should try to hone in on what the requirements are for the brand or for the marketing team, and just really build for that. So I would say, the content modeling is something that has been one of the biggest hurdles that we've had to face. And then the other part is that there's a lot of decisions that you can make from a technology standpoint. We have really went in on Gatsby and Next, and those two tools are great, but also when you're in Shopify theme land for a long time, there's a lot of things there that just make things much easier, like the online store, and they have the online store 2.0 now, and it's easier to go build different sections and then push them up to the platform. And then when you're jumping into React land, it's just a little bit different. So there's things that you want to really think about before you do this.
Awesome. And I'm hearing some technologies that I'm quite familiar with here at Netlify, Gatsby, Next.js. Can you give us more details on, maybe from a technical perspective, how does Pack approach the e-commerce front end with your customers and on these projects? Can you give us some more detail into what goes into that?
Andrew, do you want to give a little bit of take on how we approach it from the front end standpoint and the tooling that we're building, and then I can jump more into some of the technical stuff?
Yeah. So maybe to start, so like I said before, we've had a number of projects where we've implemented content management systems, and like Corey mentioned, a lot of the success of those is determined by how you set up the content modeling, just to make sure that you're not taking a step backwards from the online store that people are used to. So one of the things that we've built that I think is an advantage to a degree is really the we have a theme editor that allows you to actually do live previewing. I think that was probably the biggest change that we made. Just working in all these content management tools, it really ends up putting you in like a little bit of a black box where you're not entirely sure what the management of the content is going to look like until you go through an actual full build and preview, which can take a handful of minutes. And when you're used to just seeing things live on the fly, then I think that's the expectation. So that's one thing that we've invested a lot of time into, is just making sure that we have live previewing available for our merchants. And then we've really gone all in on Next.js for a lot of the front end. So Corey, I don't know if you want to dive into some of the details around Next and the React components.
Yeah. So we decided to go. We started off with Gatsby, and we're still huge components of Gatsby, and we're still using that. But we decided to jump into the world of Next a little bit too. They have some great features when it comes to static and dynamic rendering and things like that. So with a full-blown e-commerce store, it can be challenging to have the entire store be static, right? Because you have things that you want to rely on from a dynamic standpoint, like inventory and pricing and just other third-party updates. So inventory being one of the most popular, obviously you don't want to be grabbing and adding to cart with products that are no longer in stock or have inventory, right? So we've been able to really leverage some of our tooling and middleware that hooks into our front end with Next to do live calls for inventory and pricing and things like that. So there's definitely some features like that have been really helpful. And then it allows us to just have more control over the front end tech stack. I think for a long time when I was building with Shopify, I've always had this idea of really building different components, right? And it's, Shopify is great for so many things, but when it comes to the front end and templating, there's not really a component aspect to it. So when you're using things like Next and really using this framework for what it's built for, it allows us to build these components in a way that are very reusable. And then we can push our components and our custom sections back up to our platform. And then we can, give those tools back to marketers and merchants and admins. So there's a lot of great features behind it, and also just the speed and performance of how you can build as an engineer and a developer. It's lightning fast, and it takes a minute to get into the groove of it if you're in Shopify land, but over time, it really shows its true colors and how you can really just have more control over your front end, and that's really what the focus is here. So
yeah, one thing I would just add, Nelson, to your question, I think apps is always like a big talking point in Headless, and like what you lose and how to overcome some of these things. And so we've tried to like componentize as much as we can the apps that are common players that you'd see every day, the Yapos, Klaviyo's, Attentive, all those solutions. And so there's definitely a lot to talk through in terms of apps. Like there's a category of apps that are just related to the back end that will work as normal, right? Anything that's like managing, 3PL or inventory management, those really will continue working as normal. There is a bucket of apps that probably is not going to work. So if you think about, Shopify has, a $5 a month add a promo bar to your front end that's like very liquid theme specific. That's not going to be something that's going to work. But then, a lot of the third parties that you'll oftentimes see as front end integrations, those do have to be built in a way that works with this new stack. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that has been a learning curve, because it's certainly not a blocker to implement those, but obviously it's not the same as just injecting it into a liquid theme.
Absolutely. Okay, understood. There sounds like there's not only the mindset shift of moving to headless and all of that entails, but quite a bit of work that this team is doing on, making sure that the experience is seamless also for marketers and editors as well. Super interesting. So kind of going into some of those successful projects that you have built, some of these successful kind of headless commerce stores, could you tell us more about the results that you're seeing and the results that your clients are seeing as a result of these kind of PWA storefronts?
Yeah, I can start. I think like I said earlier, I think speed is always like the biggest driving factor for these conversations. So that's always a major focus when going down this path. So I think the other thing too, just to acknowledge as well, is that given that going headless is more or less an exercise of rebuilding the front end in just a new tech stack. A lot of the merchants we work with will take that opportunity to just rethink the design. So that's one thing I would just say before I kind of like go into some of the results that we're seeing, because we've seen lots of pretty significant lifts in conversion rate and overall engagement and average order value. And I think while some of that will have to do with rethinking the experience, I think a lot of it can be attributed to site speed and how that has a direct impact on conversion rates. Also worth noting too that a lot of our clients are upwards of 60, 70, 80, 90% mobile traffic. So I think that's another big driving factor of making this as good of it as an experience as possible on mobile.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you bring up a few important points on commerce. How about it sounded like you were also working to make sure that marketers, content editor workflows were really streamlined. Are you seeing any kind of noticeable takeaways on that side?
Yeah, I mean, I think that should be like a major success factor in going down a project like this, because I think, like we kind of hammered home earlier, is like the position you don't want to get into is this thing that is just fast but unmanageable. So I think the most important thing and what we try to strive towards is making sure that like those merchants that were on Shopify and used to that world aren't taking a step backwards in terms of the capabilities they had in Shopify. So I think that's where a lot of our focus has been, is to making sure the things like live previewing are all there. But I think there's also an added layer of like flexibility that we've been able to give merchants when it comes to things like landing pages and being able to stand up templates that you can then repurpose and reuse a lot of components that you built for other aspects of the experience. So the more modular approach to all this, I think it's been a big benefit. And then the last thing I'll say too is I think this shift of static site generation has actually been kind of like a nice surprise to especially marketers, where they can actually have a full preview and manage content, manage product changes, and actually have a full production build that they can preview ahead of time before they actually hit the publish button. So it was kind of something that we didn't even, to be honest, like go into knowing that would be a big benefit. But I think that's a pretty heavily used feature that's kind of powered by Netlify as well.
Awesome. Yeah, and that does bring me to a last point of the planned questions. I can see that the Q&A is quite active, so thanks to everyone for contributing there. We'll of course get to those questions as well. I can see quite a few interesting ones. So Corey, Andrew, sounds like the deploy preview functionality of Netlify has been useful. I did also want to spend a little bit of time, talking about within the solution that you've built, maybe specifically, how are you using Netlify as part of that infrastructure?
Yeah, Corey, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I was reading some of the Q&As. You were mentioning around how we're using Netlify today inside of our infrastructure.
Yep.
Yeah, so really we use it for all of the build pipelining and the hosting. So Netlify has been great to really introduce our clients to you guys over at Netlify to get high powered CDNs and fast build times and things like that. So one of the big things with headless stores is that headless stores have to build, right? And sometimes that can take a long time, and sometimes that can be really quick. And Netlify has done a great job at working with us and providing a really strong package to all of our clients on that front. So really, you're our hosting provider and our infrastructure. So it's been great working with you guys on all of our clients that we have.
Awesome. Anything else to add on those before we jump into some kind of audience Q&A?
I think that's most of it. Yeah, there's some juicy questions too. So.
Yeah, a lot of juicy questions. I think we can start with one from one here, which is, are there brands that weren't worth taking headless after everything was said and done?
It's a good question. I will say we say no a lot. I think with headless being a little bit of a buzzword, I think it means something different to everyone, and people kind of want to jump on the train early. I would say for the most part, nothing comes to mind from our perspective. But I know, what I mentioned earlier with, there you can definitely build a headless store that is fast but very difficult to manage, and I think that is what will bite someone that's not ready for it. Because I think, especially with a smaller brand, they need to keep just like agility a priority, and that's a really most important thing. So if you get yourself in a position where you're not agile, I can see that leading to not something you want to do. So I think that kind of answered the question, but there's I'm sure lots of brands that have gone headless that shouldn't have.
Okay, good judicious answer there. Looking at the next one, are there any typical third-party solutions that are required or recommended on top of Shopify when you're migrating to headless?
Third parties.
Yeah, so maybe we can just focus in the world of CMSs. I would say, so there's a handful of different ways to build really anything, but when it comes to the world of headless, you can approach it with introducing a CMS. You can build it just statically if everything's going through your development team. So there's definitely different approaches to this, but I would definitely lean on some sort of CMS type tool. There's a handful out there. I would say Contentful probably is definitely leading the community and just the adoption when it comes to headless CMSs right now. But there's also Sanity and Prismic, and these are all things that we have experience with as well. Really, between a CMS and just hooking your store or pulling your data from Shopify and starting to build, and then having a provider like Netlify to host, those are really the main parts you need to really get up and going. Depending on your business requirements and what you're looking to achieve, there could be a handful of other third parties that you'd want to be looking into, whether it's you want to be testing, if you have just basic SMS needs and all of those types of things. But those are pretty wide range of topics right there. But when it comes to CMSs, definitely keep CMSs in mind as you're going headless, and then a hosting provider like Netlify as well.
One other that comes to mind when you were talking was Google Tag Manager, and I think that we could probably tack that onto the list of like hurdles that we had to overcome, was making sure that you still had a really solid foundation as it relates to reporting and analytics. The way that we've built a lot of our Shopify stores have been to have the entire experience be on kind of this headless infrastructure, and then the checkout goes to that subdomain for the checkout, and that still lives on Shopify. And that's great for using Shopify's checkout and the stability of their checkout and all the integrated order management and all that good stuff. But there are some challenges, or you just need a plan in place to make sure that when you go from main domain to another checkout subdomain, that you have things like attribution tracking in place. So we've used Google Tag Manager to accomplish a lot of that. Also partner with Elevar, give a shout out to them because they're a great partner to make sure that analytics foundation is super solid. So that's just one other I would add to the list.
Cool, thanks. And it sounds like the team is pretty interested in CMSs. So we have another question from Danny. What CMS are you using for managing the front end? That's a good one.
Yeah, it's a great one. So we have used a lot of different CMSs at this point. Most of our stores are running on Contentful, but we, like I mentioned earlier, we have used Sanity, and we have also used Prismic, and then we're experimenting with a couple others too, just to kind of understand the landscape with everything it has to offer. So majority of our stores are running on Contentful. I think the advantage to using something like Contentful is that you, as an admin, can go in there and build your content types and really have control over that, which is really nice. And then there's Sanity on the opposite side of that, where it's more of a developer CMS. You build out your content types through a different schema, and then you push it up to the platform. So that part has been pretty eye-opening as well, because you get to architect really entire CMS through building it and then pushing it. So there's some pros and cons to each, I would say. But yeah, long way of saying most of our stores are running on Contentful today.
Yeah, I would. The one thing I would add to that too, we also, if we're talking about what's the easiest and simplest solution for a CMS, and let's say that there's not a huge requirement for some big, multi-channel CMS kind of strategy, we also have a tool that we've used that we've integrated directly into our workflow, where that's more or less of a theme editor type of tool, and it hooks into just an asset manager or a CDN. But that gets the job done in terms of managing really simple components or content pages that can work outside of like a traditional headless CMS, like a Contentful or Sanity or Prismic or one of those. So that's a, there's a lot in content management. So hopefully that answered the question.
Awesome. Cool. So next one is a question from Robin, and it's, I've been working on the Shopify API for about a year now. I'm curious to know, since you all have been working with it a lot longer, how do you think about the API changes and keeping up? Or if you don't?
I would be curious what Robin means by keeping up specifically, but overall, we've been using the Shopify API for quite some time. It's been a great experience. I think the one thing that a lot of people either may or may not recognize at times is that you could have built a headless store, 5-6 years ago, if not longer, using their APIs. So of course, at that time, it probably wasn't the right time, but Shopify has really strong and mature APIs, and they do a great job at keeping up documentation and just pumping out new features and just letting the community know when they do that. So I guess I answered my own question. That's probably what you mean by keeping up. We're strong believers of the API, and yeah, we'll continue to use it.
Cool. So we spoke a lot about content modeling. This one is next. So any tips on working with data modeling between clients' needs versus what the Shopify API gives you? And any best practices you've baked into your processes now that you've worked with it so much?
That's a great one. Corey, I don't want to butcher the answer here, but I'll kind of start it. But one kind of interesting feature that we ended up just building into our tool set is some of the needs around managing product groupings and product bundling. So for whatever reason, we've had a lot of clients that have kind of reached that 99 variant limit in Shopify, which has required apparel brands, for example, to have to split out products by colors. And then when you visit the product detail page, you want to make sure that all of them look like a single product where you can kind of swatch between each color, even though they're actually different products in Shopify. So one of the things that we've done is build a grouping feature where we can pull in the Shopify product data, group products together by by some sort of attribute. In this case, we do it by a certain product type, and then be able to present all of that data to the front end, so we don't have to put a bunch of logic in the front end code. So I think there's going to be a few different ways to approach that, but I think if you are kind of going down this path of building out really custom data models, there is kind of a unique opportunity to have some of that logic live outside just the front end. But I think overall we try to keep it as close to Shopify data as we can, so there's not like a huge discrepancy between the data. So I don't know, Corey, if you want to add on to that or correct me maybe on anything I said.
No, I mean that was great. I think just to kind of reiterate there, we've worked with a lot of fashion brands over just our time here at PAC, and then also prior to PAC, I've really ran into this variant limit quite a bit, and there's a handful of different ways to solve it. But one of the biggest ones is tagging the products and then looping through them, merging them, and displaying it on the front end. And that's a lot of business logic that really shouldn't live on the front end, right? So we have found a lot of these challenges just throughout the time and started baking them into our infrastructure and our platform. So those are certain things that we're offering out of the box as solutions. And then those are hopefully things that you don't need to worry about when it comes to content modeling later on, right? It's like, okay, these guys, the PAC team already has the product groupings and they also have the bundles. We don't really need to spend too much time trying to figure out and architect a solution for that. And we'll, kind of look at the content models as just, for the lack of a better term, like just dumb, like a dumb wrapper, so you can have the content flow into it, right, and just put it on the front end. So it should just be like text and assets and things like that, button colors, different variants of button colors. So that is the way we've been looking at it, and it's been really helpful to have some of those features baked into our workflow today.
Cool. Do you see any of the lightweight commerce solutions? There are a few examples, commerce.js, making a difference in the headless space that Shopify merchants are in?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. Our kind of niche has been really leaning on Shopify for doing everything in terms of all the e-commerce functionality. So I think the space we play in is really building a modern head for taking Shopify headless. And so in that scenario, that is making an assumption that the merchant is operating just fine on Shopify. So not to say that Shopify is going to operate fine for every merchant, but I think that is probably where some other solutions out there can start to become relevant. If there's some operational requirement that Shopify can't do, for example, that would be accomplished through one of these other tools. I think that's how we look at it. But we've obviously been working with Shopify for a long time, and that's been our sole focus. So I don't know, Corey, if you have anything to add, but I'm familiar with some of these tools, but we don't have too much experience with them.
Yeah, I think you nailed that one.
All right, this is a pretty good one and a good opportunity to showcase some of the projects you've worked on as a team. So can you share any brands that you guys built that are great examples of headless?
What a great question. Who paid this guy?
Yeah, right. We'd like to think all of them. So we have some case studies on our site. We actually just redid our website and just enhanced some of the case studies and some things around it. So if you go to packdigital.com, you'll see a handful of different sites on there. But the ones that really stand out would be everything inside the case study. So the Cup Clothing, Liquid IVs of the world, I think, really highlights what we've been doing and some of the work that we're really proud of. So not to jump too much in the weeds there, definitely check out the case studies. But Andrew, I don't know if you have anything to.
Yeah, no, I think Cuts Clothing is a great one. They've seen a ton of growth, and I would say took the leap pretty early to go in the headless space, and it's paid off, which is awesome. Public Rec is another great site.
Yep.
Recently launched Good Molecules, very fast and snappy. So yeah, case studies is probably a good reference.
Cool. Yeah, quite a few good case studies in there, and yeah, Cuts Clothing, of course, I think everyone's familiar with that brand, so good one. Next one up is, sorry?
Go ahead, Nelson, sorry. Go ahead.
Cool. Next one up is from Nick. So Nick asks, for headless, the Shopify checkout experience stays the same, or is there a headless option for that as well?
So the vast majority of our merchants are just using the native Shopify checkout. So what I was referring to before, when we subdomain the Shopify checkout, we're actually just pointing it to the core Shopify checkout that's on checkout.liquid. So we don't like that. There's a lot of advantages to doing it that way, and part of it is just less headaches, right? Because you know exactly where those orders are going to go. It's the beauty of doing it in this manner is that like this project isn't viewed as a replatforming, right? Nothing operationally changes. You're really just taking that online store and building it on a different framework. So in terms of if there's a headless option, not to my knowledge, I think Shopify's kind of kept that pretty tidy and buttoned up to make sure that I'm sure for security concerns and all that sort of stuff. But we've mostly just left it on the Shopify infrastructure.
Okay, awesome. So next question, I think, was kind of related to the previous one around CourseJS. It sounded like this team didn't have too much experience with that. So maybe we can skip that one. I think just the group here won't have too much of an answer for you on that one. But I will go to Joshua's question, which was, this team uses Gatsby and Next. What are your thoughts on the upcoming hydrogen and oxygen?
Yeah, that's a good one. So hydrogen and oxygen were the Shopify announcements around kind of their approach to building React storefronts. So I can maybe start, and Corey, I don't know if you want to jump in, but sure. I think there's not a ton of information quite yet, so I probably don't have like a fully fleshed out opinion on this, but we're keeping in touch with the Shopify team super closely. It seems like from what we saw, there's going to be some interesting React hooks that hopefully we can leverage. But those are things that we've built, for example. So it'd be great to have something that was tested and guaranteed by Shopify. I don't really know much about the oxygen side of the house. So Corey, I don't know if there were any other kind of takeaways from the hydrogen oxygen updates that you want to shed any light on.
Yeah, I mean, I think you did a good job just kind of explaining it. Really what it comes down to is that there's not a whole lot of information out quite yet. The one thing, like Andrew mentioned, is that we're building out our own React hooks and maintaining those. So from the announcement at Unite and just kind of speaking with the Shopify team, it sounds like they're going to be building out their own, right? Which means that we can start leveraging Shopify with those types of React hooks and start introducing them to our platforms to our platform and to our clients. The more it proves itself out and matures over time. So we're excited about it. I think being able to leverage Shopify with those things is such a great opportunity to really tie in with them closer in the headless space. So a lot more to come on this front. But as of right now, it's still a little bit unknown, but definitely exciting to to know somewhat of the direction they're trying to go in with the React hooks, and Oxygen being one of the hosting providers too. But I'm not entirely sure about the Oxygen stuff quite yet either.
Cool. Okay, so this next one might just require some kind of refreshing on what the tech stack is and how it all fits together. So maybe you two can help shed some light on this question. Someone asking, what is the main difference between your solution versus Contentful plus Gatsby?
Yeah, I can start, and Corey, you can fill in the gaps. But essentially, all our solution is, when we're referring to that, is a wrapper around technologies that we've integrated together to work in this headless Shopify environment. So it's things like Netlify, Next.js, and then we also have a theme editor that we've built into the workflow to allow merchants to easily manage content. The source of that content can come from a CDN, or it can come from an outside CMS like a Contentful. So the Gatsby piece we've used on a few stores, more in the early days, and Next we kind of use as an alternate to Gatsby, so that we aren't really necessarily using those together. So hopefully that clears things up. Corey, anything to add there?
No, I have nothing to add there.
Cool. So then, just to clarify, folks can still use Contentful and Gatsby as part of the solution. They're just different parts of the tech stack. Absolutely.
Right.
Okay.
And ultimately, we're doing a bulk of these implementations, and part of our process is just to make sure we're using the right tools to accomplish whatever the goals are. So I would say, not every client is set up the same and using the exact same set of tools. So it really just depends on, what the best solution is for that client.
Cool. Next one is, do you have some ballpark figures for implementation costs and durations for headless Shopify projects?
Yeah, that's a good one. So I would start and say that some of the earlier projects we did were a pretty big undertaking, like call them 6-month projects, 5-6-month projects. A lot of that, I would say, is trying to overcome a lot of the challenges that we saw early on. At this point, with the tool set that we have, like, we're getting that down where projects can be close to 2 to 3 months, 3 to 4 months. I think the big variables are, obviously that answer is just, it depends to everything, but we are at a similar level of effort as it takes for us to basically build a Shopify theme. So all the similar variables with, what are the third parties, how big is the sitemap, what different components, what different templates, like those are kind of the things that can swing it one way or another.
Cool. Next we have from Michael, how do you address clients that want to use some of the larger Shopify apps that only integrate with liquid themes out of the box?
It's a good question. I'm trying to figure out what Shopify app we could maybe answer this around.
I would love an example of a larger Shopify app, because, like, from what I see, the larger apps in the ecosystem, and larger, I just in terms of like the scale of client enterprise type of apps, usually have a little bit more of a mature set of documentations and more mature APIs and things like that we can usually tap into to leverage. So I think understanding kind of which apps to talk through. The one I will say, the one maybe just category of apps I will say are related to anything related to the cart. The way that we're using Shopify is through their Buy SDK, and so any apps that are directly using the Cart.js and exclusively work with Cart.js. That's one challenge that we've come across. But yeah, other than that, I would love to just hear what apps you might be referring to.
On the cart side too, I know that there's some companies progressing with using different ways to tie into the headless environments and headless stores. So I know Rebuy Engine is definitely one of them, and AOV Boost. They've done a good job at implementing their cart through the headless checkout. So we're in some early discovery with them on figuring out how to use those a little bit further. But the cart is definitely a big hot topic right now.
Awesome. Cool. So as we are already creeping up on the hour here, we can do maybe one more question. I like this one a lot because it's really forward-looking. So how do you see the future of personalization of the front end and the headless space? I think that's a good one. Looking forward maybe for the PAC team. What's next?
Yeah,
That's a great question.
That is really good. So Corey, I might lean on you a little bit more for this, but like we've had a number of requirements or just requests come in about how to approach this. And I don't know, Corey, you might have an opinion on maybe what the future holds, but yeah, I think we've been asked to kind of layer on things on top of the storefront where things are much more kind of dynamic on the front end and taking in all the customer information to present a personalized experience. And then we've also come across some that are more at like the build level where they want to have a completely different static site experience that part of it's maybe an A/B test where traffic goes to one version versus another, and then passing all that information into some sort of analytics tool so you can track that. So I totally agree. I think it said it's the Wild West in there. I agree, and there's no standard solution yet. I don't know if you have anything to add to that Corey.
Yeah, this is a really good question. I think we're still so early on in the headless world right now, trying to figure out. Everybody's taking somewhat different approaches to building out headless stores, and it's just a really exciting time to be a part of the trend and really the transition of people really adopting this type of technology. The one thing I would say is that we are saying the future of commerce is headless and all this, but it's also the present. We're living it every single day right now, and it's really exciting. So I think the one thing that we are really focusing on right now is how do we provide a really strong developer experience where they can have control over different, building out different templates and different sections and having just full control over that by pushing it back to a platform where you can have somewhat of a no-code experience, or not no-code, but low-code experience, I'm sorry, where marketers and admins can really have full control over their sites. So there's a lot to come in the headless space, but we are really focused on trying to provide a really strong experience for both engineering and development teams and marketers and admins. So we're really excited about it, and yeah, really thrilled to be a part of the headless world.
Awesome. So with that kind of forward-looking question, that's a great way to wrap up. I do want to thank again the PAC Digital team and our audience for joining us. To the audience and everyone who chimed in today, thanks for the great questions. This is, of course, a recorded session, so you'll receive a recording link. You can, of course, share this talk with anyone else who might be interested as well. From that side, I think we'll wrap it up and say thanks again to everyone for joining.
Cool. Thank you, Nelson.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Nelson.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Yeah, bye.
Bye-bye. Are we out?